Hello and welcome on this new episode of Education Futures. Today we're very happy to have Erin Mote with you. Hello, Erin, and welcome on Education Futures.
Hi, it's so great to be with you today.
Yes, we're very happy and very thankful also because we know you're on holidays this week. It's Thanksgiving. The whole of America is on holidays, and
Yes.
we still get to have some US guests on the podcast. So thank you.
Yes, we're going to stuff ourselves with turkey and tryptophan and take naps in the great American tradition. So,
That's the best. That's the best.
yes.
Wonderful. So, Erin, you are a recognized leader in education innovation and AI safety in digital infrastructure for learning. You're the co-founder and executive director of InnovateEDU, where you lead major initiatives like Project Unicorn, the EDSAFE AI Alliance, and Learner Studio. These are efforts that shape the future of interoperable, safe, and learner-centered technology ecosystems. And we would love to know more about all of this. We're particularly interested, Laurent and I, in youth online safety, AI safety, and you're like the perfect guest to talk about these topics. So yeah, we're excited. So did I forget anything in your introduction, Erin?
No, well, maybe that I'm a mom of two kids.
Oh,
So, online safety and kids safety. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, Robert and Claire, is really important to me. And even though I've been working in tech policy for 20 years, I, like many parents and folks who maybe even grandparents and caregivers and are thinking about the intersection of this technology, safety, security, and how, as parents, we navigate this new arrival technology into both our child's lives, but also into schooling and into larger society. So
hmm.
that's probably an important thing to talk about. I'm the one on the softball field when my daughter's playing who parents come up to and say, "Tell me about this AI thing." And what that tells me is that these are kitchen table conversations that are happening in schools, in homes, and on softball fields across the globe. And so I don't have all the answers, and I'm struggling to navigate it too. So with that caveat, I hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you. I would love to start with the AI safety topic. Um, So EdSafe puts safety first in its framework, the EdSafe framework. So education, obviously, S for safety, A for accountability, F for fairness and transparency, and E for efficacy. You put safety first in that framework. What does it mean for you, AI safety education?
Yeah, so I think safety is table stakes. I think and it's important to say that I worked with a number of really world renowned technologists and thought leaders as we put together the EdSafe AI framework. And it's a compilation of 24 global frameworks. And one of the reasons that safety is first is because that was something that many of these frameworks started with questions of privacy, doing no harm, how we protect young people's data, how we continue to be safeguards and guardians of something that I think for a long time we haven't been as thoughtful about maybe in education in terms of protecting young people's data and their digital identity. And every conversation that I have with parents and in communities, we start with safety because I think there's real questions around how data is used in this technology, what guidelines and guardrails are in place, and how we are being stewards of young people's experience with this technology. And so it's not just about like PII, and it's not just about is the data safe and is it secure, but it's what's the experience that young people are having and interacting with these technologies that we need to be incredibly mindful of. And we're talking the week, before next week here in the US, we'll see what will be a pretty groundbreaking set of legislation that comes forward in our Congress. 19 bills packaged together in the House, and on the heels of some really landmark state legislation in California that puts safety and security at the top of the list when we're talking about AI, social media, and sort of a wide variety of ed tech.
Is it
And
a sorry, is it a
no,
first in the US that you have seen this bill package? The first on the topic of kids' online safety?
it's not. So, we've had other pieces of legislation that have come forward. And we have a foundational layer of legislation, but it's real. What's sort of inspiring for me about this package of legislation is that it contemplates um, different mechanisms and means, from age verification to platform accountability to really sort of getting around the conversation around what's the duty of care, what are the harms, the demonstrable harms that we know young people are experiencing when they're over indexing on this technology. And so um while this is not the first, and certainly I think here states have been leading, California, Colorado, New York, even our friends in Texas, have been leading in these conversations. To see all 19 bills come together at once in one package um, is pretty groundbreaking at the federal level, and I think acknowledges uh, something we're navigating here in the US, which is how do you navigate the promise and the peril of this technology? And how do you make sure that safety isn't really the counterpolarity of innovation when it comes to innovating on schools, innovating on models, innovating with AI?
I I like how you break it down to, like, there is protecting the data of the kids and protecting the experience of the kids.
Yeah.
Um, could we be more precise about what is exactly the fear? Like, I know that's a basic question, but what's the problem with data leakage, and what's the problem with poor experience? Is it just like, oh, they are not going to learn in an optimal way, or is it, can we break their brain, have them like, what's actually the risk?
Yeah, I think this could take us the whole hour, Laurent, when we talk about some of the risks, but I'll try to break them down. I think sort of in a couple different spaces. So let's just talk about the potential of predictive technologies using demographic profiles that might potentially serve up content to students that isn't meeting their needs, or so that's sort of in the instructional space. Or I think in some cases we've seen here in the US, um, potentially overclassifying a student, or putting them for disabilities or that type of thing, or at risk, underclassifying a student using predictive analytics based on behavior. And frankly, I think there's been some really groundbreaking research on this from folks like Poonra Mishara over at Arizona State, who has shown that when you add some adjectives to describe text, so Poonra's classical versus rap. So if a student puts in that they enjoy classical music, the AI algorithm personalizes the content at a higher grade level. But if they say they like rap music, it actually personalizes the content at a lower level. That shows a level of inherent bias in the data set that's delivering the instructional content that we have to address. So that's sort of one risk, is that we're tracking kids, we're profiling kids, and we're assigning resources to students in the consequential decision making space that is actually not reflective of their abilities. So we're not adequately testing and deploying these models for bias, and I think in education, we don't have enough data sets that are open source, and or even synthetic data sets to be able to do what healthcare has done, which is sort of over index for places where the model might discriminate, um, particularly on diagnostics. So that's the first one. So that's sort of like
Can we
one.
stay First one, maybe it's going to take the entire hour, as you say, but
Yeah,
we would love to dig
yeah.
into that one. But how do you put the limit? Because at the same time, I think you're going to agree that adaptive learning software is a great way to enhance education and to improve students' learning. So, and to build an adaptive learning software, you need a bit of those labels, maybe not all of them, but at some points you need to know
Yeah.
where the student is performing. And sometimes you are going to find out that one specific label actually helps the students, even if it's not the right level. I don't know. Like, how do you find the limit between actually collecting data to help the kid and collecting data that's going to damage him
Your
or her?
question makes an assumption that's really important, which is that you're building software that's purpose-built for education. And so there's a real difference between building software that is purpose-built for education, that ingests the learning sciences, that's doing some of that predictive modeling and allows for, again, the ability to course correct or have a human in the loop, versus, I think, some of the other risks that we're seeing in the widespread use of consumer frontier LLMs in classroom through wrappers or non-purpose built software. And so this is where we get into the learning experiences conversation and how we are or aren't intentionally designing for software that prioritizes pedagogy, the learning sciences, and aspects of adaptive software that's built for education. And this is, again, like one of those places where I'll bring up risk number two. Consumer frontier LLM models are built for engagement, not for learning. They are built for engagement. And so that means that they are built to keep users hooked in the model, going on and on and on. And what we know, even just from these frontier internal research releases that they've made, is the longer person, not even a young person, the longer a person is engaged with these models for longer periods of time, the safety experience degrades. And so some of the things that are being contemplated in the US seem really simple, like notifying users at certain benchmarks of time that they're interacting with a chatbot and a robot and not a human. The fact that we're having to do that betrays something about what we're learning about these models and about optimizing for engagement rather than optimizing for learning. And I see this with my own son. So my son is super into Percy Jackson right now. Like this is a story about a young boy and the gods of Olympus, and we are going to Greece in a couple weeks. And so he's in charge of researching our trip to Greece, planning our itinerary, doing all
Awesome.
these things. It means sometimes we over-index for playgrounds rather than cultural experiences, but that's okay. And so he is using AI to do this with a ton of supervision from both his parents. But I will have to set a timeline and a deadline for him along how long we're going to co-work together on research, because I have to go do something else. But when he hits that half an hour mark, he doesn't want to stop. He wants to go deeper because the model is responding to his queries. It's telling him cool, exciting, interesting things. It's taking him to images and pictures and engaging in conversation with him that is, very human-like. And so I watch Robert get more hooked on using the model, right, to do his research. And I know that that's the experience that other folks are having. And I literally have to yank him away and shut the computer lid, and put some boundaries in place. And frankly, I don't know that all parents have time to go side by side or know that they need to shut the computer lid and sort of disengage, or that even young people have the discernment to understand that they need to shut the computer lid and walk away.
And it's always complicated because the atmosphere in the house can be a bit tensed when you do so. So I guess it's
Yeah,
complicated.
it invites conflict in our relationship.
Yeah.
Literally, we have AI-centric conflict in my house.
And I love how you explain that intention is at the base of everything, but even for engagement, my feeling is that sometimes, and a bit of gamification helps also learning softwares to just keep the kids learning. So again, I feel like the limit is hard to find. Maybe I would love to have your view on an example. A lot of most people know, like Duolingo, for instance. Would you say that because I think it's at the limit to my mind, because like the intention is to like gamification is huge, it's outstanding, like it's made up to have people keep going, but at the same time the end goal is to learn a foreign language. So maybe you can learn Greek at
Yeah.
the edge. Like, how would you view that kind of software?
Yeah, so I think I think gamification is different than sycophancy. And like I think what we have in, again, being deliberate in design, I think there is a really going to the E in the SAFE framework, there is a really well researched body around gamification, engagement, incentive, play, productive struggle, all these things that actually develop our brain and develop for learning, versus I think what we see in the behavior of many general purpose chatbots or commercial wrappers on top of foundational LLMs. They're not built on that learning science. They're not built on those principles of productive struggle. They're not, in fact, they like are looking to eliminate struggle. Which like we can talk about the MIT study around, the cognitive offloading and losing metacognition. Productive struggle is a huge part of developing critical thinking, metacognition. So I wouldn't even put Duolingo and a foundational AI model in the same space. The other thing I would say about Duolingo, which I just, I love that team who's leading so much of the research there and is really thinking about purposeful design. They publish their research all the time, even when it's not great. And I think there is something to be said for folks who are, I think about our friends over at Anthropic or others who are putting out research that, is trying to benefit the sector. And so that's also a little bit about intention. Are you a company that's furthering the field rather than furthering your bottom line? And so I think we have to have some honest conversations about how we engage and involve in the space of education and learning, because that's going to be the thing that every person in our society is going to have to be able to do, is to evolve the way they learn over their lifetime. I think about discernment as sort of a critical skill we need to build in young people. Sycophancy doesn't do that. I think about the work we need to do about young people being able to navigate with resilience and grit and being able to know when they need to pivot. That doesn't happen with sycophancy, but
No.
sometimes it happens in things like Duolingo, where when you're trying to learn Spanish, you have to go back and practice, practice, practice over and over again.
Hmm. And so, do you think that general AI models are making us dumber? Like that they're not making us intelligent? On the contrary, what's your point? What's your point of view on that question?
Yeah. So, there's a lot of nuance here. And I think there are a spectrum of models. And I think there are models that do things differently and are, I think, in different places when we talk about purpose built for learning, uh, models that are more pro social, models that are better at certain tasks. Um, so, y- I think this is like when somebody asked me if AI makes people cheat more. I don't think that AI makes people cheat more. I think Victor Lee's work out of Stanford is pretty resounding around that. I think if you are inclined to cheat, you will cheat, but that's not about AI. That's about sort of, you know, something very different. Your judgment, your ethics, so on and so forth. I think if you don't know how to use this technology, it certainly has the possibility of reducing your ability to critically think, to discern, to connect knowledge across domains, which is why, I think at EdSafe and with a number of partners globally, we're so focused on AI as literacy as a foundational literacy. Because for me, it's a little bit like how we had to think about teaching young people about the inputs and outputs that the internet produced and what was a reliable source and what wasn't a reliable source. And so um, there's a lot of work we have to do to help people understand both how this technology works, how they can use it to be not just more productive and more efficient, but frankly, like how it can aid in their own exploration, like with Robert in Greece. Um, and so we need to make massive investments in AI literacy, and AI readiness. I think that is the pivotal piece,
Absolutely.
for
Absolutely.
economies right now.
And do you have some insights as a parent, like on which model do you allow?
Oh, this is a hard one. Yeah. I mean,
Because yeah, I love what you're saying about pro-social models. I would also love for you to just explain what a pro-social model is for our listeners. Although it sounds quite obvious, but yeah, there are some models that are maybe more, I don't know, more adapted to kids than others.
yeah, I think we need more well-developed benchmarks on AI and
Absolutely.
education. And so I'm always hesitant to say like this is the model for you. Because I like to again come from a research base and an efficacy base. And I don't think we have, for example, a great learning sciences benchmark yet. I don't think we have a great benchmark that's built for the AI and education use case. I will say that I am a technologist. And so let me sort of speak from my own experience with that caveat that this is just anecdotal and not evidence based. But um, like I like Claude from Anthropic for coding tasks. I think it is the best, most well developed model that helps me with coding tasks that I do, helps me with making sure that the types of queries I'm running and designing are well aligned. Um, for small language models, I like the features that are in Gemini. I think the ability to restrict your corpus to a small set of documents and that being the knowledge base rather than Gemini hitting sort of the general internet has made the small language models that we're building at InnovateEDU um, much more specific. And I'm excited about some of the work that they're doing to think through like persona based small language models. I think that is something that could be really exciting in terms of knowledge access, dissemination, so on and so forth. So let me just like break that down for what that means. That means like if I have a question and I'm the chief information officer in a school district, or if I'm a parent, a persona-based small language model or chatbot would allow me to take on that persona and ask that question. And the knowledge that's generated from that is quite different if you're a CIO or if you're a parent, including in terms of like level setting and prompting. So we are big Gemini users in our house because we've been able to build those gates. But again, I think one of the things we are very focused on at EdSafe, and you'll see us release in Q1 and Q2 of next year, one is going to be a benchmark for AI companions and chatbots, specifically to AI in education. We have a task team working right now on this that's representative of researchers, industry, practitioners. It's a wonderful task team of folks all coming together. The second one we will release, this will be a little bit early Q2, will be a benchmark on learning sciences from EdSafe specifically for the AI and education use case. These are not new things, but these are things that frankly other sectors have done ahead of education and I think have steered model development, purpose-built model development in the right direction and allowed people
Amazing.
to evaluate. So like
Amazing.
I don't think right now we have prepared CIOs, educators, and parents with the right information to evaluate what works for whom and under what conditions. And so we got to run at that problem in our sector the way that healthcare ran at it.
And curious about how you do that. Do you think it would be possible to publicly create a data set that will like automatically like would let all those LLM benchmark themselves on your data set. Is it what you are doing? Yeah,
That
okay.
is where we are going. I mean, this is a place again where I think we really need to take a lesson from other sectors and have a much broader based approach. We are advocating, Laurent, really heavily right now in the United States that one of our government agencies, the Institute for Education Sciences, make their NAEP data that is no longer sort of relevant to future test cycles, open source and available. It's a federal government data set. The people own it, and make that data set open source and available so that industry could use that to better develop AI and assessment models. We're really leaning into recommendations around synthetic data. And I was super pleased on Monday to see Genesis get announced by the White House, which really leans in to the R&D infrastructure question across many sectors and took many of the EDSAFE public infrastructure recommendations from our April 2025 paper and put them into sort of directional signals for our research and science community. We need to build a synthetic data set that's broadly representative of all students, and frankly, I think probably does what, again, healthcare did in diagnostic data, which is over-index for rare disease, so that you can, equip doctors who might be so think doctors, educators, equip folks for the first time to be able to sort of understand the full potential of what might be happening for a young person. And so we need to do this for synthetic data. Again, going back to that safety piece, because I think right now, through no fault of their own, the regulatory and foundational sort of structures in the US means that, companies can really probably only red team, which is test their systems and benchmark on data that they have within their systems. And that just means, I explain this to people, like, it just means it's going to amplify the bias that already exists in their existing architectures. And so, people say, like, how do I choose an AI tool that has no bias? I'm like, that is not the question. The question is, how do I choose an AI tool that has a set of processes and procedures in place to mitigate existing bias? Because the reality is every AI tool out there is built by humans, is built on data that is already biased in the system. And so you have to purposely, again, design to both mitigate bias or do the things that we know how to do in computer science, which is like over-index on, sort of the outlier effect.
Absolutely, absolutely. Um, I would love to ask you a question because at Education Futures, we really love to explore desirable futures for
Mm.
education, and I love reading everything you share on LinkedIn, and you shared such an interesting perspective on the future of jobs I would love to discuss with you the future of jobs because it's very very much linked to the future of education that we're trying to explore at Education Futures. And so you're talking about the difference between job automation and job displacement, and you've shared recently some of your concerns about Amazon preparing to replace over 500,000 jobs with robots. Can you tell us more about it, and making maybe the difference between having your job automated versus displaced, and
Yeah.
how fast we can expect some jobs to be displaced versus only automated?
Yeah. So, this is an interesting thing here because I think you sort of have to understand sort of the history of economics. We're not going to be able to fight automation, and in fact, like periods of automation often occur highest post recession. And so, here in the United States, I think. Absent the sort of magnificent seven in our stock market, I would say there are localized recessions happening across the country right now. And so, and that's probably not what your listeners want to hear, but sorry, let me break it down. That, I think we are experiencing some uh I think challenging dynamics when it comes to economics here in the United States. So we know that companies are going to automate. They're always going to automate to prioritize productivity and efficiency, and they're prioritizing their bottom line, their profit and loss. So it's
Wow.
very difficult to skill build to intercede in automation. So that's the first thing. So what I want us to be thinking about is how do we avoid displacement and what do we do when someone is displaced? So, displacement means that AI takes out the early career ladder rungs, right? I think there's pretty good data now that this is already happening in the United States and it's happening globally, that the first couple rungs on the career ladder are absolutely disappearing. And that's for young people who are under the age of 25. Those are those entry level jobs because the tasks and the skills in entry level jobs can actually be displaced by AI right now. So I talked about how I use Claude to check my code. When I started as a computer scientist, that's what I did. Like when I started working, my job was to check the code of the more senior engineers and the whole team. Like I did QA.
Yeah, and
And
it's
that's
exactly why you learned and why you became so
yes,
so good.
yes, yes. But but now AI has displaced those jobs. And instead, what you need now is the scrum master, the person who can work alongside AI, manage a team, prioritize, do those things. People don't become sort of the scrum master or the project manager until 3 or 5 years in their career. And I didn't just learn technical skills when I was QAing code. I was the only woman on the team working with a whole set of male engineers who didn't really love some of the things that I was saying about their code. And so I had to learn how to
Mm.
be a better communicator. I had to learn how to like do the compliment sandwich. Like I love how you did this, but maybe do this differently, or this introduces like tech debt that we're going to have to pay down the road, all these things. So part of my job was technical, but so much of my job was how I communicated, how I worked in a multifunctional team, how I critically thought about not just what the code did now, but what the code would do as we began to build and iterate on it, right? And tech debt is an expensive thing to mitigate. So that was always a very compelling argument. So I think the things I'm thinking about right now in jobs is how do we give young people those experiences that get them and build the skills to be a scrum master much faster if those early career jobs aren't going to be available. And do we
Mm.
do that through things like national service? Do we do that through the types of learning experiences that you get in higher ed? Do we do that around the types of learning experiences you get in high school here and middle school? Um, so that you are moving from sort of rote knowledge, consumption, and then sort of, recall to what does it mean to be able to critically think? What does it mean to have metacognition? What does it mean to think about working in multifunctional teams alongside AI? What does it mean to be a discerner? What does it mean to engage in discourse and dialogue? Those are the skills that are at that 3 to 5 year mark. And let's just be honest, we have built a system where you get a couple years to develop those skills in the workplace. You get knowledge in higher education. You don't really get those learning experiences. And so there's a seismic wave of disruption coming at us. I feel a little bit like I'm standing on a beach and the water's out of the bay and a tsunami is about to hit. And I see the water coming out of going out of the bay. And I look around and I'm not convinced that we're not just like moving the beach chairs. Like
How should we do to run faster and avoid the tsunami?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to really radically change what we're doing when we talk about what is the purpose of education. We are largely still operating in a schooling model that prioritizes knowledge transfer. We need to move to a learning model where, again, we're using the learning sciences to understand how we build that ability to work in a multifunctional team, to develop discernment, to engage in dialogue and discourse, to think about disagreement, and to have to like navigate that with humans. So there's lots of things AI doesn't do well. It doesn't emote. It's really bad right now around, connecting knowledge across domains still. Um, it's evolving faster, but um, I do think we need to be thinking about how we create learning experiences, not schooling experiences. That's a seismic shift. I'm not sure we can avoid the tsunami. We might need to climb in some trees
Mm.
and look for new models and some lifeboats.
I try to find the equivalent in the US. In France, we have something we call alternance, and it seems that it could look like something you could call cooperative education program.
A
Is it
dual
something that
dual
sound
education where you
Dual
are in,
enrollment.
yeah, you're in university and then you also are working at a company in parallel.
Yeah, we have some of those models like cooperatives, like co-op models, apprenticeships,
Apprenticeship.
um, that type of thing. Laurent, they're still relatively small by
but
comparison.
but it's something that we could scale in order to could that be an answer to this issue?
Totally. And I think it's not going to be one answer. So there's not going to be one silver bullet here.
Yeah,
So
sure.
I think us doubling down on national service and doubling down on our AmeriCorps program that allows young people to serve in communities that are different than theirs, that they have to encounter and work with people that come from different backgrounds. So I think that's one way. I think the co-op model is really interesting. We do a ton of work at InnovateEDU on apprenticeships for educators. So we have rated the national guideline standards for K-12 teacher apprenticeships, and we've scaled that to all 50 states in 3 years. Two things we're working with the Department of Labor on now. One is a tutor to teacher pipeline, so a tutor apprenticeship, and the other is a principal apprenticeship, which is like our school leader here in the US. And so how do we think about apprenticing not just one profession, but apprenticing the career ladder so that people are earning and learning while they're moving through and building economic and social mobility. So I think that's one way. I think and then I think co-op models are one way. And then, but I don't want to just think about how we put band-aids on a broken system. I think we need to think about radical redesign. Um, and
Absolutely.
and
And
that
also have a
means
look at earlier than higher education. I mean, higher
way
education
earlier,
way earlier. Yes,
way
at
earlier.
the very beginning of
Yeah.
schooling.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think, how do you design developmentally appropriate learning experiences? Notice I am not saying schooling. I am saying learning experiences that are building those skills. That doesn't mean we're having all kids at age 4 and 5 use AI. I am not saying that. I am saying that there's a set of AI literacy activities that you can do to build proficiency in the way these tools work so that you can be a critical consumer, so you can build discernment. And I think we have to really think about this as foundational across all of our disciplines. And frankly, I think there's countries who are doing it better right now than the United States. And so you see me in Congress in conversations all over talking about why we need to make this radical shift.
Absolutely, absolutely. What would be what would the ideal school look like for you, Erin, if you had to build
Oh.
one now for that would last at least 20 years and you have
Yeah,
unlimited budget, really have
yeah,
unlimited budget? What would you do?
yeah. Well, as someone who built a charter school in New York
Oh,
City,
wow.
in
Yeah, I read
Brooklyn,
that.
I will tell you that, like, I'm not sure I could do that again. Because that was such a love. But like all labors of love, came with a considerable amount of pain and suffering. But if I could build a school, and maybe a school that I would hope for Robert and Claire to thrive in, um, I think we would make some shifts. Those shifts would include prioritizing personalization and engagement, allowing for passion driven learning, less time in seats, and not having to have that yardstick of seat time be the measure of what we sort of pitch towards. I always remember we would get to this time in February at Brooklyn Lab and we'd have to give our summative exam, which is like a once a year exam around maths and literacy. And we'd have to, after our first year, we realized we had to put our technology personalized learning platform away because um, our young people were able to solve the math problems, but they weren't showing their work. So they were only getting half a credit. So literally we would have to like reconfigure our entire learning experiences so that we could keep the school open and hit the yardstick of the summative exam, which was built on a really rote industrial model. I would shift the role of teachers to be much more team teaching, less sage on the stage, close your door, deliver information to more coach and mentor, and really thinking about how you diversify the number of adults in a classroom who are forming meaningful connections with young people. We have a crisis of loneliness and disengagement here in the United States with school. And I think what we know from research is that just one meaningful connection with an adult, it doesn't have to be the teacher, it can be a coach, it can be a tutor, really shifts and changes how a young person responds to where they are in their own mental health. And so I would really focus on human connection, personalization, different types of learning experiences, break down the seat time rule, go to flexible chairs, more like modular furniture so that learning can happen anywhere. And I would absolutely prioritize work-based experiences as early as middle school, so that young people are both having the ability to experiment with what they know and what they don't, and it not be a punishment if they decide they don't want to do something. It doesn't sort of set them back. That failure is actually built into the model. Discernment is built into the model. So that's what I would build for my own kids, and um,
Amazing.
that's what I would hope that we would think about when we think about school.
Absolutely, absolutely. And teaching all of these skills, as we said, as early as possible to really teach them discernment, critical thinking, as you said, and being creative, thinking outside of the box, not preparing them for a job, because I think, we're still in many educational systems, we're preparing young kids for future jobs that will not exist in 15 years time. So yeah, I love your vision of the school of the future and the present, because it should start now.
Yeah,
And
I
I'm
would say
glad.
one other thing I would
Yeah,
introduce into my school,
yeah.
which is like deliberate encounters with conflict. One of
Mm,
the things I think we have lost over the last 20 years with the advent of social media is both having a wider view of the world and a wider view of differences and diverse opinions, and the ability to navigate conflict, interpersonal conflict, like ethos level conflict, like belief level conflict, and to do that in a way that you can engage in discourse and dialogue that is actually incredibly like human centered and appreciates a diversity of perspectives. It's very Socratic. I know I'm calling all like Greece seems to be a theme of this podcast that I'm calling all the way back to Socrates and Plato and the amphitheater of learning. But we need that back
yeah,
um, in a major way, not just for kids. We need
no,
that back in our communities
absolutely.
and our society.
Absolutely. We need more nuance as well.
Mm,
People are
yeah.
now much more like geared towards the extremes. We need more nuance. We need more dialogue. And in France, there is this wonderful initiative started by some non-for-profits. It's called We Need to Talk.
Mhm.
It's a 10-question form that you fill out. Very easy questions. For example, does AI make us dumber or more intelligent? Are old people, retiring people, more privileged than young ones?
Mm,
Should we stop eating meat to preserve the planet? These types of questions, very easy to answer questions, and you have a whole list of them. You answer them, and then they match you with someone that is in your city that has replied at the opposite of you.
I love that.
And then one day they tell you this is the day where you should meet, find a spot, find a cafe, and just talk for 1 hour about your differences with open-mindedness and just listening actively to each other. And so I participated, and this week I had the chance of meeting uh, a man that had the exact opposite answers, and we spent 2 hours in a cafe just chatting, listening. I opened up my mind because some of his arguments were really interesting. I've never thought about this way, and same for him. And it was this extremely rewarding experience. And I think it's just like, yeah, everyone should go through this at any age, because we need to
Yeah.
talk to each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the dopamine hit that you probably got while you were like,
Yeah.
your brain was firing, right? On all cylinders, both like taking in those inputs and being able to like think through them, and your neurosynapses were probably on fire. I mean, I think
Yes.
that like this is the thing that I think is really important about how we need to understand how our brain works, which we know so much more about than we know now. So one of the things I always reflect on is that the place that allows your brain to think about what the future is also holds all the memories of the past. And so it's actually like a physiological thing to have reference experiences and then to use those experiences to shape what you believe is possible and what you believe is next. And so as we think about the education futures, one of the things I think that is really important for folks to understand, this like grinding that you feel in your brain around the future of work and around the future of school, is actually totally understandable, because your brain is actually struggling to think about what's coming, because it's also referencing what your experience is and what's in the past. And so how do we know that about our brain and structure learning experiences that are just like what you encountered, right? Where your synapses are firing, where you're in dialogue and discourse and disagreement, so that you can see something differently. And if we don't structure experiences like that cafe experience you have for young people, I'm afraid we're actually programming young people towards polarization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for reminding us about how our brain works, because we often forget, and some people don't even know that. And I think it's so important to know at neurosciences, and that will help us, understanding our biases, and make
Totally.
sure, yeah, we maybe it could help us be more hopeful also for the future.
Well, and I also think maybe I hope it relieves people a little bit, because just like I talk about the things I'm struggling with as a mom negotiating this technology with my own children, and I've been in tech policy for a really long time. I know how this technology works, and I'm still in that struggle. And so it deeply reminds me um of that's okay to feel that dissonance and to feel comfortable in that dissonance. And so I also want us to learn from those experiences, though, because I think we now have evidence around what social media has done to young people's brains and what it's done to our society, and where it has both had promise and peril. And so I hope that we can reflect upon that experience as well as we shape how we encounter this arrival technology of AI.
Thank you, Erin. The last question we'd love to ask you is a question we ask every guest. Who should be our next guest on Education
Oh
Futures?
my gosh.
Someone who not specifically someone in education. We've had philosophers. We'd love to have historians, sociologists, because the future of education is a matter of everyone. And it's really such an important topic that we want a lot of perspectives to be represented. But we also love people who work in education. We love people who work in tech and who understand, AI very well, and can also share something on that side. So we would love to have your input on this.
Gosh, to pick just one. So that's really hard for me. I'm gonna name somebody who's really pushing my thinking right now around this jobs and displacement piece, is a woman named Molly Kinder at Brookings Institution. I've known Molly for more than a decade, and she is really, I think, taking on this conversation around what do we do for young people who are 25 and younger, right? Also important to note their prefrontal cortex is not fully developed yet.
Yeah.
So they need those learning experiences more and more. That's the discernment center in the brain. But Molly is not from education, but has both a global perspective from years of working in international global development, but is also really taking on this question of work and the future of work. And for me, the silos we've built globally around K-12, higher education, and workforce have to be broken with a sense of urgency so that we can understand that our young people aren't on steamships charting one course to the future, aren't on sailboats where they have to skillfully tackle. They're whitewater kayakers that are going to have to read the current, see the rocks before they're happening. And it's not just young people, it's all of us that are going to have to become whitewater kayakers. And I think unless we break those silos down, we're gonna have a lot of people in sailboats, a lot of people standing on that beach, looking at that tsunami and not having a boat to get into. So Molly has really pushed my thinking. Happy to connect you if you want to be
Great.
connected. But she's really thinking and asking smart questions right now.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Erin, for your time, and happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. I'm going to go off and eat some turkey and dig into the mashed potatoes and also probably 6 slices of pie. So no judgment, I hope. So
Thank you
Surely
so
not.
much.
Surely not. Thank you. Thank you.
bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.